bit more touchy-feely today. We are exploring our goals, what we want. And as we're exploring our goals, I want you to keep in mind this kickoff for Project 1. As far as your assignment with this first section with goals, what I'd like you to do is to give one sentence for each of two different goals or objectives you have in your life. Maybe they are super well-defined goals, maybe they're more generalities. Regardless, what I want you to do is to put together kind of a well-structured, kind of thought-out plan of how you intend to go in that direction during your life. Third, I want you to identify some risks to that. We'll be discussing risks in the next class, but just point out some of the risks of things that could endanger those two goals. I want you to point out the things that are not related to personal finance, and then the ones that are related to personal finance. And finally, I've provided some links to a few more TED Talks that discuss this direction and passion and trying to identify the things in your life that you care about to get you thinking. And it's not that you're going to necessarily agree with them, and honestly, they contradict each other, so you can't agree with all of them. But the point of it is to get you thinking about the different goals and desires that you have in your own life. Below this video, I've provided a link to a TED Talk by Clay Christensen. And specifically, you can watch the whole video, it's quite good, but specifically I want to call your attention to 550 to 911 of that video. He goes through a couple stories that are pretty illuminating. So I can wait here patiently. You can pause this while you go watch that from 550 to 911. Just kidding. If I were patient, I would just sit here, but I'm not. So you can pause it and go watch that. But continuing on, the key takeaway that he provides for us is that he points out that when we make a series of short-term, non-coordinated decisions, what happens is that's going to sum to disaster. He used the example of Lucent Technologies and Cisco, and he makes this great point. I wonder who decided at Lucent to go out and get killed? Or in our own lives, what day did I decide that I wanted my family to hate me or something like that, where we take these decisions in the short term, but in the end, they can sum to disaster because they're non-coordinated decisions. So it occurs in business, it occurs in our personal lives as well. And so it's something to keep in mind where we are drawing a line back from our goals and drawing that line back to the present, which is going to help us to win. Define what's important now is the acronym, but help us to win. So going back to the famous line from 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. So with goals, it's begin with the end in mind. If we know where we are going, it's much easier to decide on a day-to-day basis what is essential on what we should focus on today. So highly recommend the TED Talk, but especially the couple stories that he shares from 550 to 911. So a few things to keep in mind as far as discussing your goals and working on your project. And while you're going through these videos, I want you to just consider and kind of ask yourself a few questions. And some of these videos ask you these questions specifically, but think through, how do you respond to the question, who are you? And the question, what do you want? And who will you become? These are actually really deep and sometimes difficult to answer questions. And the point of this exercise is to get you thinking and to get you moving in one of these directions. In one of the videos that I decided not to include, but it brings up a good point, is that it asks the question, what do you want to be when you grow up? And it follows it up with, are you going to answer that with your career? That's a standard question that we ask. What do you want to be when you grow up? And we're asking about jobs. But their point was, life is a lot more than just career. While career is super important, I spend most of my waking hours with my colleagues in my career than I do doing anything else. But it's one note in a chord. So there are other things that are important in our lives. So what are we achieving? And so some of these videos emphasize that more than others. So finally, there's the question, what and who will you become? Not just what are you going to accomplish, but what will you become through that process? So think these things through, take careful notes, go through the videos. I'm sure you're going to do fine on Project 1. Finally, I have people ask, what is the purpose of this exercise and this feel-goodery One of the primary points, even if you don't know your exact direction, is to at least get your eye off of the balls that don't matter. Eye on the balls that do matter, eye off the balls that do not matter. And so we can combat squirrel syndrome, where we're distracted by whatever is loudest and whatever is walking by. And from our previous class, it helps us avoid situations. In the previous class, brought up this quote by Nigel Marsh, but doing these types of exercises helps us to avoid these situations that we can fall in. Like he describes, that there are thousands of people out there leading lives of quiet, screaming desperation, where they work long, hard hours at jobs they hate to enable them to buy things they don't need to impress people they don't like. So going through these exercises, at the very least, we can start to avoid more often these distractions or these things that are least important, or at least less important in our lives than what is essential.